So once you start adulting and you start paying for your insurance and paying your electricity, water, and probably rent, one of the big decisions you have to make is, what am I going to invest my money on? While you might know a lot of people that invest in individual stocks, or even yourself, you have a good portfolio of stock picking that you make money out of, when it comes to retirement planning, so your 401k and your IRA, you have to be a little more conservative and you have to start aiming for the long run. Now, there are a lot of things that you have to decide, like what asset class do you want to pick, what type of diversification do you want to use, how often are you going to rebalance, and many other topics that we're probably going to cover in this channel. But today, we're going to cover the difference between investing in actively managed portfolios and passively managed portfolios, which is a huge thing that you have to look at. So let's hit it. Now, before we get into the differences, let's cover one similarity. So actively managed and passively managed funds are both funds. What a fund is, and I always explain this analogy, is you can always choose individual stocks. So you can now go into whatever brokerage you use and go and buy a share of Apple. I call that going to the supermarket and getting one ingredient. So you go for Apple and you get sugar. What a fund does is, instead of them letting you buy one share of one stock or one ingredient, they personally get all the ingredients, make a pie, and then you can go and get a slice of that pie. So you get the sugar, the milk, the butter, whatever you want to put in your pie, and then they make this huge pie that you can buy slices of. So what it helps you is that with much less money, you can actually get many more stocks that you could have with the money that you have. So that's what a fund is. Now, with an actively managed portfolio, the way that it works is that the people making the pie are actually people. So it's one principal investor that heads the investment fund and probably has a lot of co-managers or even a team of managers that decide what stocks to buy and sell in order to try to outperform an index fund like the S&P 500. The issue with that is that, one, buying and selling stocks actually becomes pretty expensive because you have to pay transaction fees and have to pay taxes and things like that. And two, and most important, all records show, and every book that you read is going to tell you, that in the long run, no one can actually outperform the market consistently for a long period of time unless you get very, very, very lucky. So that's one of them. And for a passively managed fund, instead of trying to outperform the market by buying and selling securities, the way it works is that it seeks to replicate a market index. What that means is that it grabs a market index like the S&P 500 or the Russell 1000, and it gets a computer, not a human, but a computer, that is going to try to buy and sell very few stocks just so they can get the same weights of those indexes. So one of the biggest differences here is that actually you don't have a person anymore doing all the buying and selling. You have a computer, and that computer is going to buy and sell much less stocks than the actively managed fund will. So think about it. When you have a person that you have to pay and you have a computer which you just have to feed electricity and probably some code, one of the biggest differences is how much money it costs. So the way funds track their expenses is through something called the expense ratio. The expense ratio is the cost that a fund is going to have compared to their assets under management. So there's a formula that is like the cost of the fund every year divided by the assets under management that can give you the expense ratio. But if you want to look at it in a very simplistic way, like I do, is think about the percentage of the returns of the fund that you're not going to see because they have to basically pay for the managing of the fund. A good rule of thumb that they usually tell in books is that you should aim to have funds that are less than 0.75%. If you read about it, you're going to find a lot of books that make charts comparing how if you have a 1% expense ratio or like a 5% expense ratio, how that differentiates to when you have like less than a 1% expense ratio. And at the beginning, that might not make a lot of difference. But when you're talking about these retirement accounts that your investing time frame is 10, 20, 30, or even 40 years down the line, compounding with expense ratios can take a fat chunk of the money that you're putting in. So when you're looking at active and passively managed funds, what you have to think is, well, how much money do I actually want to pay in expense ratios? Now, it's been widely proven that passively managed funds usually outperform active in the long run because with expense ratios and being less volatile when you go with passive, those are just going to be better. For me, what I do personally is that I just invest in index funds 100%, and anything that goes beyond half a percentage in expense ratio is way too high. Now, a great book where you can learn more about this is The Investment Answer, which is also a great book to get started with in personal finance because it's very short, and they talk extensively about it here, and it's also not that technical, so it's very good if this is the first book that you read in personal finance. But breaking it down to the actual funds that you can invest on in your retirement accounts, I'm going to be doing a video in 2 weeks where I'm going to be talking about it. I'm going to break it down extensively when it comes to asset classes and rebalancing and how it should change when you grow older. So definitely hit the subscribe button for that so you can check it out. All right, and that's it. If you have any other questions, leave it in the comments, and we'll see you next time. Peace.